You just told your dog to sit. They looked at you. They understood. They understood because they've done it 1,000 times before. But this time, they just stood there. Not defiant, not aggressive. Just still. And the longer the silence stretched, the more it felt personal. Like they made a choice. Like they decided you weren't worth listening to. Most people interpret that moment one of two ways. Either the dog is being stubborn, or the dog is dominant and needs to be corrected. But researchers in canine cognition and learning theory have spent decades studying what actually happens in a dog's brain during what looks like disobedience. And what they've found consistently is that when dogs don't obey a command, it's almost never about dominance. It's about one of three things: unclear communication, competing motivation, or, and this one surprises people most, intelligence. Let's start with the dominance myth, because it's been so widely repeated that even people who've never trained a dog have heard it. The idea goes like this. Dogs are pack animals. Packs have high. If your dog doesn't obey, it means they think they outrank you, and you need to assert yourself as the alpha. That entire framework came from studies of captive wolves in the 1970s. Wolves that were unrelated, thrown together in artificial enclosures, and observed under stress. Those studies were later debunked by the same researcher who conducted them, David Meck, who has spent the last 20 years trying to correct the record. Wild wolf packs are families, parents and their offspring. There is no fighting for dominance. There's cooperation based on age and experience. And critically, dogs aren't wolves. 15,000 years of domestication changed their social behavior. Dogs don't form hierarchies with humans the way wolves do with each other. They form attachments, and yet the dominance explanation persists because it offers a simple narrative. The dog didn't listen, so you need to be stronger, louder, more forceful. But that narrative doesn't match what happens in controlled studies. When researchers test whether punishment-based corrections improve obedience, the findings are consistent. Punishment suppresses behavior in the moment, but it doesn't improve learning. It increases anxiety. It damages trust, and it makes future training harder because the dog starts associating commands with stress instead of clarity. Dominance isn't why your dog didn't sit. So what is? Let's start with the most common explanation. The command wasn't as clear as you thought. Human language is abstract. The word sit is just a sound. It only has meaning because your dog learned to associate that sound with a specific action. And that association only holds if the context is consistent. If you taught your dog to sit in your living room with treats while you were standing directly in front of them, that's the context they learned. Now you're at the park. You're 10 feet away. There are other dogs around. You say sit, and nothing happens. That's not refusal. That's generalization failure. Training terminology calls this stimulus control. The dog doesn't actually understand the command until they can perform it, regardless of location, distraction, or your body position. Most pet owners think their dog knows sit. What the dog actually knows is, when I'm in the kitchen and my owner is holding food and says that sound, putting my butt on the floor makes good things happen. That's not the same thing as understanding sit as a universal concept. So sometimes what looks like disobedience is just incomplete training. The dog isn't refusing. They genuinely don't understand that this context is the same as that context. The solution isn't correction. It's more repetition in more environments, until the behavior generalizes. But let's say the dog does understand. The context is the same. They've done it before, in this exact situation, and they still don't respond. Now we're into competing motivation. Every behavior a dog performs is driven by what behaviorists call a reinforcement history. If sitting when you ask has consistently led to something good, food, praise, play, then the behavior is reinforced. But if something else in the environment is more rewarding than obeying you, the dog will choose that. A squirrel running past, another dog approaching, the smell of something fascinating in the grass. From the dog's perspective, this isn't defiance. It's a cost-benefit calculation. Sit equals maybe a piece of kibble. Chase the squirrel equals full sensory engagement and possible prey capture. The squirrel wins. That's not personal. That's how learning works. The fix isn't dominance. It's increasing the value of the command. Better rewards. More consistent reinforcement. Higher value motivation. If your dog ignores you for a squirrel, it's not because they don't respect you. It's because you haven't yet made listening more rewarding than the squirrel. That's a training gap, not a relationship problem. Now here's the part that almost nobody talks about, and it's the most fascinating layer of this entire issue. Sometimes dogs don't obey because they've learned that the command doesn't make sense in this context. And that's not disobedience. That's reasoning. A 2021 study out of the University of Vienna tested whether dogs would follow a command that contradicted their prior experience. They taught dogs that a specific box contained food. Then, in front of the dog, they visibly moved the food to a different box. Then they commanded the dog to go to the original box. Most dogs hesitated. Some refused entirely. They looked at the owner. They looked at the box. And they chose the box with the food. The researchers called this rational noncompliance. The dog understood the command. They chose not to follow it because they had better information. That's not stubbornness. That's cognition. There's a real-world version of this that happens all the time. You're walking your dog, you tell them to come. Donde. But from the dog's perspective, the last 3 times you called them over, you ended the walk. You clipped the leash and went home. So now, come doesn't mean come get a treat. It means the fun is over. The dog isn't being difficult. They've learned a pattern, and they're avoiding the outcome. That's called a poisoned cue. And it's created by the handler, not the dog. The solution isn't a stronger correction. It's retraining the cue with a positive outcome, so the association changes. Now let's talk about what this all means practically. If your dog doesn't obey a command, before you assume it's a behavioral issue, ask 3 questions. Does my dog actually understand this command in this environment? Or did I only train it in one context? Is there something in the environment that's more rewarding than listening to me right now? Have I accidentally taught my dog that this command predicts something they don't like? If the answer to any of those is yes, the problem isn't your dog. It's the training. And that's fixable. But here's the last thing, and it's the one that reframes everything. Dogs that never disobey aren't necessarily the best trained dogs. Sometimes they're the most anxious. A dog that obeys instantly, every time, no hesitation, no thought, might be responding out of fear, not understanding. They've learned that non-compliance leads to something bad, so they comply regardless of context. That's not a well-trained dog. That's a suppressed dog. The healthiest, most confident dogs are the ones that obey reliably in trained contexts, but also show independent thought when the situation calls for it. A dog that refuses to come when a car is approaching. A dog that won't sit on a hot surface. A dog that hesitates when a command doesn't match the environment. That's not a problem. That's intelligence. So the next time your dog doesn't obey, take a breath before you react. Are they confused? Distracted? Or are they actually making a decision based on better information than you have? Because sometimes what looks like disobedience is just a dog using the only tool they have, behavior, to tell you that something doesn't make sense. And maybe the smartest thing you can do is listen.